There is a stretch of one ocean, on a small blue world at the unfashionable edge of a minor spiral arm, where my people left something behind that we have never been able to recover. Not a wreck of metal, though there was metal, and a great deal of it sank that night and is sinking still. Not the bodies, though there were bodies, and the cold black water took most of them so completely that we never logged a single recovery. What we left in that ocean was a certainty. A belief so old and so total that we had stopped recognizing it as a belief at all, and had begun mistaking it for a property of the universe. We believed that water was ours. We believed that we understood the sea the way a thing understands its own body, without effort and without doubt, and that there was no ocean on any world that could teach us something we did not already know. We came to that small blue world carrying that belief like a lantern, and the ocean took the lantern and put it out. And in the dark that followed, we learned the one fact that all of our science had been built specifically to avoid. I am old now, and I have told this account to younger officers who do not want to hear it, and I will tell it once more plainly, the way it happened. The sea, the commander who would not listen, the night the water rose against us, and the ones who came out of that night and pulled us from the deep. This is what we found at the bottom of the only ocean that ever frightened us. To understand what that ocean meant, you have to understand what we were before we found it. My people are an amphibious civilization, born in water and finished in air, and we have spent the better part of our recorded history perfecting our relationship with the sea. Our home seas are warm and tidally gentle, and over many generations we learned to make them gentler still, smoothing the currents, tamming the storms, raising the floors of the dangerous trenches, and lowering the temperature gradients until the whole of our ocean was a single managed organism that did exactly what we told it to do. We did not conquer our sea. We administered it. And from that administration, we drew a confidence that spread outward into everything we did, until our great civilizational pride was not in our weapons or our ships or our reach across the stars, but in this single boast, repeated in our schools and carved above the doors of our survey academies, that we were the masters of water, and that wherever in the galaxy we found an ocean, we would find a thing already half belonging to us. We mapped water worlds the way a wealthy family inventories a house it intends to inherit. Our survey fleets moved from system to system, classifying seas by salinity and depth and energy and yield, assigning each one a risk index and a harvest value, filing the results in archives so vast that no single mind could hold them. The blue world that the locals called Earth came into our catalog late, and it came in quietly, and the analysts who first processed it gave it a designation that I have thought about every day for the rest of my long life. They logged it as low risk, abundant, lightly defended. 3 words, and every one of them was wrong, and the wrongness was not in the data. The data was correct. The wrongness was in us. Our models had been built, across all those careful generations, on the unspoken assumption that an ocean is a problem an intelligent species eventually solves. We had never once in all our history surveyed a world whose ocean had been left entirely alone, allowed to keep every degree of its native violence, ruled by no one and answering to nothing. We did not have a category for that, so we filed it under the category we did have, and the category we had was calm. The commander of the expedition that was sent to claim Earth's seas was the most decorated hydrographic officer of his generation, and I will not pretend to you, across all this distance, that I disliked him. I admired him. We all did. He had risen through the Survey Corps on the strength of a single quality, which was an absolute and unshakable faith in his instruments, and that faith had served him well across 40 completed surveys without a fatality. He did not come to Earth for conquest. There is a version of this story, told by people who were not there, in which we arrived as an invasion, and it is a more comfortable story than the truth, because in that story we are the danger and the universe makes sense. The truth is smaller and worse. He came for prestige. He came to be the officer who cataloged the richest unmanaged water world ever found, to file the survey that would be taught in the academies for 1,000 years, to walk back through the door beneath the carved boast, having proven it one more time. He did not bring weapons worth the name. He brought instruments and a crew of specialists, and me, his senior hydrographic officer, who had served under him for most of my career and had learned to love the sound of his certainty. He had a phrase. Every officer of long service develops one, a verbal habit that the crew learns to read like weather, and his was 4 words, delivered in the flat, satisfied tone of a man closing a question he considers already answered. Our models account for this. He said it when the long-range scans showed surface turbulence that our home seas had not prepared us to imagine, and our models accounted for it. He said it when the junior analysts flagged the temperature of the southern water as outside our operational range, and our models accounted for that too. He said it the first time we observed the small, crude, astonishingly stubborn vessels of the local species moving across the worst of that water, in conditions our craft were rated never to enter. And he said it dismissively, the way a master dismisses an apprentice's nervous question, because the presence of those vessels confirmed his reading rather than disturbing it. If the primitive natives could float their little hulls across that sea, he reasoned, then the sea was plainly survivable, and our craft, which were to theirs as a sounding instrument is to a stone, would survey it without difficulty. Our models account for this. I wrote that phrase into the expedition log more times than I can bear to count, and every time I wrote it, it was true, right up until the moment it stopped being true forever. We chose the Southern Ocean because it looked, on every chart we possessed, like the easiest water on the planet to take. This is the part of the account that the young officers find hardest to believe, and I understand why, because they have read the later surveys and they know what that ocean is. But we did not know. We saw a band of sea that circled the bottom of the world without interruption, unbroken by any landmass, the longest continuous current in the planet's hydrosphere, and we read that uninterruptedness as simplicity. A sea with no coastlines to complicate it, no shallows, no tidal mazes, just deep cold open water running in a single great wheel around the pole, and beneath it in one place, a trench that fell away into a dark we found beautiful. It was, by our classifications, the cleanest survey target on Earth. We brought the craft down through the upper air on a day the local instruments would have called fair, and we put it into the water at the edge of the passage between the great southern landmass and the spur of the continent to its north, the narrow, violent throat of sea, where the whole circling current is forced to squeeze through a gap. And we did not understand that we had chosen, out of the entire planet, the single most concentrated expression of everything we had spent our history teaching ourselves to forget. The craft was a marvel. It was built to dive to crushing depth and to ride the worst surface our engineers could simulate, and the simulations had been run against our home seas at their most theoretical extremity. The surface chop, when we entered the passage, exceeded those extremities within the first hour. The commander watched the readings climb and he said the phrase, and we descended because below the surface, he reasoned, the water would be calm, the way it always was at home. For a time, the survey was everything he had dreamed it would be. The data came in faster than the archive could index it, layer upon layer of it, salinity and pressure and the strange wild chemistry of a sea that no one had ever tuned, and the commander grew luminous with the pride of it, narrating his own future legend into the log between readings. We dropped through the cold layers toward the trench, and each new depth gave us a prize, and each prize made him more sure. He had been right. The catalog would be magnificent. The boast above the academy doors would stand another 1,000 years, and the sea, which had been gathering itself the whole time in a way our instruments registered but our minds refused to interpret, chose that hour to show us what an ocean is when no one has ever been permitted to tame it. The change did not come as a warning. It came as an event. The current through the passage, driven by the entire rotational energy of a planet and funneled through that narrow throat, accelerated past every value in our models in a span of minutes, and where the cold, dense water of the deep met the driven surface flow, it did something our home seas physically cannot do, and our craft was inside it when it happened. The first impact rolled us completely. The second tore the survey array off the hull. The commander reached for the phrase. I heard the first word of it. The sea did not let him finish. The pressure differential that we had filed as low risk found the seam our engineers had rated against a calm that does not exist on Earth, and the craft began to come apart in the dark, and the cold poured in, the specific lethal cold of a sea that has been killing the unprepared for as long as there has been anything in it to kill. Most of the expedition was gone before any of us understood that we were dying. The water took them the way it has always taken everything that mistook it for safe. There were 6 of us left, in a section of the craft that had not yet flooded, sinking through black water toward a trench we had come to admire and now understood to be a grave. Our beacons were dead. The energy that should have carried a distress signal up through the water and out to the fleet had gone into the sea with the rest of our certainty, and the sea, which conducts our signals badly and our pride not at all, gave nothing back. We knew, with the precise and useless accuracy of trained surveyors, exactly where we were. We could have recited our coordinates. That was the cruelty of it that I have never been able to put down. The problem had never been location. We had always known where Earth's ocean was. The problem was that nothing in the long-managed history of my people had prepared a single one of us to survive the place we knew so exactly how to find. And so our knowledge sat in our minds doing nothing, a perfect map of a country that intended to kill us. We drifted, and the cold came in slowly now through the failing seals, and the great pride of our civilization, the boast carved above the doors, the 4 words the commander would never say again, went entirely and finally quiet. I remember thinking in that quiet that we would not even be a story. We would be an absence in a catalog, a survey that began and did not file, and the academies would teach around the silence the way the sea closes around a stone. The vessel that came for us came out of the storm we could not survive. On the surface we had been destroyed beneath, and it came because for the creatures aboard it, that night was not a catastrophe. It was a shift. I have studied them since, the people of that small blue world, with the obsessive thoroughness of a survivor, and the thing I have never fully made peace with is how ordinary it was for them. The vessel was a battered surface craft, smaller than ours had been, crude by every measure we used, its hull scarred and patched in salted white, a working boat out of a hard little station on the edge of the ice that put to sea in that water every winter because that water was where the work was. There were 11 people aboard. I know their names now, because I made it my business across the rest of my life to know them, and I will give them to you because they earned more than the silence we nearly left them in. The captain was a woman named Lena Martson, who had worked that passage for 30 of the planet's years, and spoke of it the way our administrators spoke of a tended pond. Her first mate was a man named Reuben Falk. There was an engineer named Mikkel, and a deckhand named Priya Nair who could not have been long out of childhood, and a medic named Grace Okonkwo who would later put her warm hands on my cold ones without the slightest hesitation, and 6 others whose names are in my private log, and whom I think of as my own. They carried no weapons that mattered. They had a winch, and a crane, and a great deal of rope, and the accumulated competence of people whose entire lives had been an argument with that sea. They found us the way they found everything, which was by paying attention. Their instruments were laughable beside ours, and they read the water better than we ever had, because they read it the way you read a thing you have to live with rather than a thing you intend to own. Something in the disturbance of the surface, some wrongness in the way the swell broke over the place where our craft had gone down, told the captain that there was an anomaly in her water, and she did not file it. She turned the boat into the worst of the storm to go and look, because in her world, an anomaly in the water at night is a life. And a life in that water has minutes, and you do not finish your coffee first. They put a light on the sea. They saw the debris of us. And then, in conditions that would have ended my entire civilization's most advanced craft, conditions we had rated as beyond the survivable edge of physical existence, these 11 people in a scarred and salt-white boat began, with enormous skill and complete calm and not one word of ceremony, to do the thing they did every winter of their working lives. They began to haul the drowning out of the cold. I was the third one they brought up. I remember the crane and the rope and the impossible fact of hands, and I remember the medic, Grace, looking at a creature that no member of her species had ever seen, a thing from another star streaming the black water of her own ocean, and I remember that she did not pause to marvel and she did not pause to fear. She wrapped me in something warm and she pressed her hands to mine, and she spoke to me in a voice I could not understand and did not need to, and the meaning of it crossed the whole distance between our peoples without a single shared word, because the meaning of it was older than language. The meaning was, I have you. You are not going to die tonight. We pulled all 6 of us from the sea that killed the rest, and the people who pulled us did not know what we were and did not ask and did not care, because to them, we were not aliens and we were not a survey, and we were certainly not masters of anything. We were people in their water, and they were the people whose water it was, and they had spent their whole hard lives learning the one thing my whole civilization had built its pride on never having to learn. They had learned to live with an ocean that would not be tamed, and in learning it, they had become the only thing in that entire violent sea that would reach into the cold for a stranger and pull. I had come to that world believing we were the masters of water. I left it understanding that I had met, for the first time, a species that the water had mastered first, and broken and forged, and made unkillable, and that this was not the same thing as mastery at all, but was something I had no word for and have been trying to earn a word for ever since. I have filed many surveys in my long life, but the one I filed about that small blue world is the only one that is taught in the academies now, and it is not taught for its data. The analysts who first processed Earth wrote 3 words: low risk, abundant, lightly defended, and every one of them was wrong, and I have spent the rest of my career trying to write the words that should have been there in their place. I am not certain I have found them. The closest I have come is this. The danger of that world was never its weapons, because it raised the kind of people who do not need them. The danger was never even the people, because the people, when they found 6 dying strangers in the dark, chose to save them. The danger was the ocean, and the gift was the same ocean, because a sea that hard makes children who do not flinch, and a people who do not flinch at the worst the universe can do are not a people you survey and harvest and file. They are a people you sit with quietly at the bottom of your pride and learn from. We believed Earth was safe because we believed we understood water. We had only ever understood the water we had tamed. The ocean of that world had never been tamed by anyone, and it had raised on its violent shores the only species I have ever met who could go out into it on the worst night of the year and come home with their hands full of strangers' lives. We were the masters of water. They were its children. And on the night the sea rose against all of us alike, it was the children, not the masters, who lived. If this account moved you, sit with the question it leaves, the one I have carried for the rest of my life, that the hardest place is sometimes the one that makes the gentlest hands. Carry that out into your own dark water and pull when you find someone in it. That is the whole of what the sea taught me, and it is the only survey I have ever filed that I am certain was true.